It's episode 45 of the GameCritics.com podcast. Happy Thanksgiving to all our listeners in the United States, and to everyone else, happy November. Let's check in with our panelists and find out how their holiday went. We'll start with our founder and owner, Chi Kong Lu. Chi, did you get enough to eat?
Yes, I did. Yeah, definitely got enough to eat, and I managed to fight off all the old ladies on Black Friday and secure a couple of purchases.
Do you want to run down your purchase list real fast?
No, that's gonna take too long. I tweeted about
big
it.
Spender.
Not really, but yeah.
How early did you get up? Can you reveal that much?
Okay, I'll get into that. That was a little funny, actually. Toys R Us opened at 10 p.m. on Thursday this year, so that actually worked out. And I had to drop off my mother-in-law anyway, so on the way back, we just stopped by Toys R Us, and it was like a freaking mile long. Like, I've never actually gotten up for Black Friday. This was the first time, so I didn't know what to expect. But thankfully, there were no people trampling each other as you see on YouTube or anything like that. It was well organized, lots of security. So we went to Toys R Us, got online for that, and managed to get out with everything I want, almost everything I wanted on that one. I couldn't get a wireless Xbox headset because there was a separate line just for that, and I didn't want to wait on another line. So then we went to, and then afterwards, somehow my wife managed to get up at like 4 a.m. rather, and we somehow drove over to Kohl's first thing in the morning. Oh my God. I dropped her off and then headed back and then went back to sleep afterwards.
Well, let me turn to Brad Gallaway and ask you the same question. How did you make out on Black Friday, or did you even go out?
It's funny you mention that because I never go out on Black Friday. It's not a thing that I do. I hate crowds. My wife hates crowds. And, we're not like really big shoppers. I mean, we buy stuff that we like, but that's just any old time. I mean, we don't really wait for like a special occasion. But I did hear a lot about some of the online deals that were going on. And since I was home for part of the day and I had easy access to a computer, I kept my eye out for a few things. And I did pick up, I think it was Majin, The Forsaken Kingdom. Got that for like $25 and picked up a copy of Fallout New Vegas for, I think, $35. So those to me were right in the sweet spot of purchase, and they were games I was going to buy anyway. So, it was fine. I participated in Black Friday from the comfort of my office and with just a few mouse clicks. And that was great. I would totally do that again next year, but I'm certainly not going to go out and fight the crowds.
Teen singing sensation Richard Nyack, how about you?
I did the exact same thing. I actually finally caved in and bought a Kindle, which resulted in a deluge of ebook purchases. Yeah, I downloaded some Stephen King books and a couple of Kurt Vonnegut books, and now my recommendation list is like Batman comics and Stephen King books, which works for me because I like both Batman and Stephen King, so I guess it's working.
There are worse fates in this world than to have that be your recommendation list. Sounds good to me.
Well, Tim, let me mention to our readers for Black Friday, I did pick up another copy of Dragon Quest IX for everyone who knows my tragic story of losing my save game file.
But the implication there, Chi, is if you are picking up a copy that would be a copy for your son, that would imply that you are retaining your copy with the intent to play later. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I thought I pretty much said that last time. At some point, I'm probably going to restart it.
Let's move on. This week, how to write a game review. It's our instructional guide to the art, the craft, if you will, of game reviewing. And it will certainly be instructional for me as I don't write reviews, and you guys have collectively written 500 or 600 of them. So that should be a fun chat. We'll talk more about that later.
Tim?
Yeah.
That's 500 or 600 just for me. So I don't know how many of these guys have done.
Right.
Okay.
I had you pegged at like 400-ish.
It's more.
I'm lowballing.
You're lowballing me, man, and I don't appreciate it even a bit.
Chi, where are you at, if you had to guess?
Probably somewhere between 200 and 300.
Holy God. And then Richard?
I want to say 40.
Man.
Maybe in 2 years.
So if we add all those numbers together, we could be talking in the ballpark of 800 reviews.
And if Mike was here, that would be even more, yeah.
Right.
We've got some experience.
We've got some experience. So we will get to that segment in just a bit. Now, no quote of the week this week. Felipe has swam home for the holiday. I'm not sure when he'll be back, so we're going to skip that part and get right to a quick hit. Pigsy's Perfect 10 is the first downloadable content for Enslaved. Odyssey to the West, $10 or 800 Microsoft points. I played through it in one sitting. Brad, I know you finished it too. Why don't you start us off here?
Sure, absolutely. As you just said, Pigsy's Perfect 10 is the first and I assume only DLC that's going to be released for Enslaved. And I got to say, it's actually really worth the price of purchase. The gist of it is that, well, I guess for those that don't know, Pigsy is one of the only other characters in Enslaved. It's a pretty character-poor game. I think there's really only 2 characters throughout the entirety of it, except for Pigsy. And he's kind of a slimy, kind of... it's like he's got some goodness in him somewhere, but he's really kind of weird and creepy, and he does some lecherous things. So he's not really... I want to say like a good guy, but I mean, he definitely fights for the forces of good, I suppose. Anyway, he lives in a junkyard. He's really eccentric. He's got a grappling hook for a hand, and he's got some cybernetic parts, and he's really fat and sweaty and dirty. So as he's hanging out in the junkyard, this adventure takes place not in any specific time relating to the main quest of Enslaved, so you can play it at any time. You don't have to have finished the main game to get any value out of it. So what happens is, Pigsy wants a friend. He's really lonely out in the junkyard. So he decides to pick up a few really hard-to-get parts, and he's going to create a robotic companion for himself. So that in itself is fine for a story, but the thing that really makes the download worth it is that the gameplay is really solid and it's really dialed in. People who have already played Enslaved will know that the main character of the campaign, Monkey, is really strong, athletic. He jumps. He's got some strong attacks. He can shoot things. He's a very, real go-getter kind of guy. But Pigsy is short. He's squat. He, breathes hard when he runs up a hill. So he's not exactly the same kind of like muscular do-everything hero. But he compensates for that by, like I said, using the grappling hook on his hand to climb up to higher surfaces. And he's really good with a sniper rifle. He's got a really cool sniper rifle that never runs out of ammunition, thank God. And so his gameplay is kind of a mix of like stealth light and some climbing and a whole lot of sniping. So it feels very, very different than anything that's in the main campaign, which is great. I mean, I really thought it was a breath of fresh air, and I'm glad that it wasn't just a one-off of what we've already seen. The other thing that really made it really worthwhile was that the story was excellent. I mean, I didn't expect much. I expected just, a couple of laughs and to call it done. But the voice actor, I believe his name is Richard Ridings, he does just a phenomenal job with the voice. I really, really enjoy his voice acting. And the development team, Ninja Theory, have crafted some just visually beautiful cutscenes, and they really set the tone nicely. And I appreciated Pigsy as a character much more after the DLC than I did during the main campaign. I thought it illustrated some very nice story tones, gave him a little bit of depth. There was a few sad moments as well, and some sweet ones. So it was a really quality piece of download, and after playing it, I just had this really good feeling, and I felt like, wow, that was really worthwhile, and that really kind of enhanced my appreciation for the game overall. I mean, I wish more DLC was done to that standard. I mean, Tim, what did you think of it?
I agree with everything you said. I liked it quite a bit, and as I mentioned, I played it in one sitting. It's about, I don't know how long it took you. For me, it was about 4.5, maybe 5 hours, and I never play a game that long in one sitting, but I couldn't stop playing this. It's the rare DLC that doesn't feel like an omitted level. I mean, like you said, it features completely new mechanics, and apart from the engine and maybe some reused art assets, it's a full game. I mean, it's a complete narrative. It's got its own title screen. I mean, it really feels like its own thing that you could just go buy without ever having played Enslaved and get a complete experience out of it. Talking more about Pigsy, because you mentioned some poignant moments. I mean, in the original Enslaved, Pigsy was largely used as comic relief. His isolation in the junkyard made him mostly just horny was kind of his primary character trait.
I was gonna say, was he trying to create a lady friend robot?
When you basically, I'm trying not to spoil it because what he ends up creating and the lengths he goes to get it back, it goes beyond loneliness. You kind of pity him. I really felt bad for him, and it just achieved a level of depth for that character, like you said, Brad, that really wasn't present in the original Enslaved. It was nice to see him used as more than just comic relief. Talking about the combat, how did you feel about the combat in the original Enslaved? It was primarily melee. There was a little bit of shooting, but was it something you enjoyed, or did you have problems with it?
It was all right for me. I mean, I thought it was fairly simple. One problem I had was that it didn't really ever seem to evolve, and I think it's fine kind of in a way that it didn't, because I think that gamers are really dependent on the same kind of arc where you start weak and you gain more powers and you gain more sophistication, and by the time you finish the game, you're, a virtual god. I definitely don't think that every game needs to follow that arc. But in the case of Enslaved in particular, it did feel pretty samey, and I felt like the combat at the beginning was pretty much exactly the combat at the end. I mean, despite this wealth of power-ups that, I mean, to be honest, didn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, it's like a guy and a girl in the middle of a wasteland, and he gives her some glowing orbs and she powers him up. I mean, that didn't click for me. But there was a whole wealth of things that you could enhance the character with, and it didn't really go anywhere for me. So it was just kind of okay. I mean, I thought it was fine, but I wouldn't ever really recommend it, based on the combat. And in that respect, I felt like what they did with Pigsy's Perfect 10 was great, because not only did it fit the character and it was totally different than what was in the main campaign, like it just made a lot of sense to me. Like the way that they had crafted each level was almost kind of, I want to say almost puzzly in a way, because, Pigsy, if a robot starts rushing him, he has like one little line of self-defense, but if there's a group attacking him, he's pretty much toast. And he doesn't take bullets very well. He's not very sturdy. So you have to be pretty cautious with him. And I thought that the emphasis on his frailty and him using his gadgets and hiding was a really good balance to the kind of, I really don't care, I'm going to bust these guys up bravado that Monkey has in the campaign. What did you think, Tim?
Well, in the original Enslaved, I very much disliked the combat system. And for me, although I will echo what you just said, I will add to that, the camera was just too close. You never got a sense of position. You never knew if you had 4 enemies surrounding you, you might be able to see one of them. So you basically could button mash your way out of the scenario, and usually that would work, but not always. I found myself kind of rolling until I was far enough away that the camera would pull back and I could see how many enemies there were. But I found it, especially comparing to the sublime melee combat of, say, an Arkham Asylum, Enslaved was just a complete failure in that regard to me. Contrast that to Pigsy, though, where you mentioned his gadgets. He basically has 4 gadgets that all perform a slightly different function. And I had a great time looking at a particular combat scenario and deciding which device I was going to use in what order. And usually for most scenarios, you could come up with 2 or 3 viable strategies. And I just really enjoyed assessing the situation, and I might use the decoy to draw some turret fire and then plant a bomb and then drop my EMP to trap some mechs in range of the bomb, then set the bomb off. I just had a great time playing with all that stuff, and I would really, I'd always rather have 4 valuable weapons than like 30 variations on the same rifle that you might find in something like Red Dead Redemption. There's not a lot of toys to play with, but they're all useful, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
No, I totally agree. I felt like it was really well done. All of the gadgets were really balanced. I mean, the bombs were really powerful, but you couldn't throw them, so you had to be kind of judicious in their use. You had to kind of think ahead. I mean, you could plant them somewhere, like you said, and lure someone in, so that was kind of a nice little change up. I mean, you literally cannot just rush through these encounters because you'll just get chewed up in a hurry. And I really liked that was a significant difference in the pacing from the campaign. And also, just getting back to the story a little bit, I did want to agree with you in what you said about how it was just some really nice touches. I mean, I got to say the story really went well beyond what I was expecting. I mean, like you said, he was just a comic relief, and he's a horny guy in a junkyard. And man, I just, I almost want to say like it gave me like a nice little warm glow afterwards. And that sounds really weird to say, but I just thought they did a great job, and I really want to commend the developers if they're listening, and also to the people who really thought Enslaved had a good story. It was an okay story for me, but I think that what they did with Pigsy was better than pretty much anything they did in the main campaign.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there are some very strong but brief character moments in the original Enslaved, but as a whole, 9-10 hour experience, it doesn't really hold up the way that Pigsy does. When you said that this is probably the only DLC they're going to do, boy, I hope that's not the case. I hope this game somehow managed to sell way more copies than anyone is aware of, and that they come back and do, whether it's a sequel or some more DLC for this, but I would like to see them take another crack at this universe.
If they can bring the same kind of quality that they did with the DLC and kind of like infuse the main game with that, next time around, whether they do a sequel or whatever, I mean, I would be all for that. Granted, it's much easier to maintain a high level of quality when you're turning out a 3 or 4 or 5 hour piece of DLC than it is for a 10-hour game or even longer. So, I mean, that's definitely a challenge that, any developer has to overcome. But, I mean, the potential is there. I mean, I liked Enslaved, but I didn't like it. And when I played Pigsies, I loved it. I thought it was great. So, I think that Ninja Theory showed quite a bit of growth compared to their first game, which was Heavenly Sword. I disliked Heavenly Sword. I hated everything about it. I didn't think the characters were good. I didn't think the gameplay was good. I didn't think it looked that good. So for them to go from something that I hated to something that I thought was pretty good to something that I thought was great, I mean, obviously they're on the right track. So I agree with you, Tim. I hope that they get to, continue the story of Enslaved and bring the same kind of quality that they've got here. But even if they don't, I really hope that they keep on this track. I mean, this track that they're on right now is awesome, and I would love to see more from them along the same lines.
Yeah. I also want to say a lot was made of Enslaved's motion capture work, the facial animations and so forth. And I will admit that while I was playing, I actually wasn't that blown away by it. I mean, it's clearly very good, but it wasn't the game changer that everyone made it out to be, at least while I was playing. Now, that said, whatever game you play after Enslaved is going to look like crap in comparison. That's where you really notice how good the work is in Enslaved. I started Assassin's Creed Brotherhood yesterday, and the animations look like an N64 game in comparison. I didn't realize it while I was playing, and maybe you did, Brad, but that motion capture is astounding if you compare it to other games.
Well, it's funny you say that because I kind of thought the same thing. I didn't really notice it during the game. But yeah, it does hold up really well to other things. But to get back to the cutscenes in Pigsy's Perfect 10, did you find that they were just like totally beautiful? Like I was watching them, and I don't know exactly what to call the technique that they used. It wasn't the in-game graphics at all, and it wasn't cell shaded, and it wasn't animation. I mean, it was kind of like a blend of all three of those things. Yeah. And I thought it just looked fantastic. Yeah. I mean, what did you think? Did you like those two?
I thought the same thing. I was wondering, is this cell shading? Well, no, it's not. It's not quite cell shading because it's still retaining the motion capture animation of the actual cutscenes. I don't know what it was, and I would love to read more about the tech. But it is. It was stunning. Stunning is the best word for it. Just cinematic and gorgeous, and
yeah, it was great.
Fully recommended.
Great. Class act all the way.
Yep. And it is very rare these days that you and I agree on something. So clearly we're on the same page here, and this is something I hope people check out.
Yeah, exactly. If Tim and I are both agreeing on something, it's good. It's got to be good.
So before we get into our main topic, why don't we take a quick break? We'll listen to some music, and when we come back, how to write a review. Stay with us. welcome back. Our main topic this week, how to write a review. We've had a number of comments and questions over the last couple years we've been doing this show, and certainly over the more than 10 years that Game Critics has been around, from people who are curious about the review process and might be looking for maybe some tips on improving their own work, improving their critical skills. If you are an aspiring critic, hopefully this will be of some help to you. And let me just say, we are not claiming that this is the one best way to write a review. We certainly don't want to make that claim, and that anyone who disagrees is wrong with us. That's not what this is about. What we're going to talk about tonight is what works for us, for our site, and as I said at the top, I don't write reviews, but I'd really like to, so I am actually quite eager to hear what the three of you have to say. Before we get into the headier, more philosophical stuff, let's talk about logistics. Let's talk about the rituals that you guys follow when you are playing a game for review, when you're prepping for a review. And let me start with you, Chi. When you're going to review something, walk me through the process. Are you playing with a notepad in your lap? Are you sitting a certain way? Do you have a certain beverage next to you? Walk me through the ritual.
I actually don't take notes, and that may be sound unusual for some people, but that's sort of like my I like to consider one of my innate talents, where I can play through the game and sort of just remember the moments I want to remember and write about what I want to write about. So I actually don't take notes, I try to avoid reading any reviews prior to playing as well, so I could just sort of have a very fresh perspective on it.
I do actually take notes. Sometimes I take a lot of notes. It depends on the game, really. Like for Black Ops, my Black Ops review that just went up, I didn't take really hardly any notes at all. Really, I just wrote one word. And for Amnesia: The Dark Descent, it was, I think, a good 2.5 pages in my notebook that I had taken up, and most of them was just drunk scrawlings of nonsense. But
So, all right. Well, you threw this out there, and I have to follow up. What was the one word you wrote for the Black Ops notes?
Competent. That's literally all I wrote, and I was actually really surprised after I finished the game that I only wrote that one word.
Meh. That's the word I was expecting you to say, but
oh well, it's sort of the same thing, but.
So when you're not writing one word, or you're not writing drunken ramblings, what's an example of a note that you might write when you hit a game? I mean, how much detail go into these notes? Is it just sentence fragments, or are you getting down to like paragraphs as you're taking notes?
More often than not, it's just sentence fragments of thoughts that I want to remember, because sometimes I'll have some insight into what I actually feel about a game, or the game will invoke some sort of feeling in me that I need to write down, or just so I will remember it later. I really don't get into too much detail because I want to write it quickly and then get back to playing the game. So it's really it's in a bullet format, which I just start a list. I'll write little things, my thoughts. Sometimes I'll remember what, for the review format on the site, I'll just remember what my high-low WTFs are, and I'll just write down little candidates for those. So it's really just little blurbs, and sometimes there's a lot of them, and sometimes there's not. Mm. There's almost always more than one word, though.
And Brad, as Game Critic's most prolific reviewer, I imagine you just have stacks and stacks, like an entire closet filled with legal pads. What is your note-taking process, if any?
It's kind of evolved over the years. I think when I started, I was pretty diligent about having like a notepad nearby and some pens, and I would, play the game and pause and write a thing or two. But as the years have gone on, I've kind of changed what works for me. And so I'll just sit down and I'll just play a game. It's kind of like Chi. I will try not to read anything. I might read something, but I won't read any reviews. I don't want to read any reviews before I play anything. So I'll come into a game, relatively open to it, or as open as possible in the internet age. I'll play through for, a session or two, and then I'll just think about it. How do I feel? What strikes me? What's my general takeaway? I mean, when I turn off the console, Am I wishing that I put another hour in, or is it like a relief to push the power button? And I'll jot down a sentence or two. I mean, I'll walk over to my computer and I'll pull open Word or something, and I'll just write down, camera sucked, or, good moment in level 3 or something, and that's it. And I'll just leave that. I'll finish the game, and I'll usually think about it for, I don't know, maybe like a day, and I'll just kind of just mull it over, and I'll just start writing. And any notes that I wrote, I inevitably throw out, and I end up not ever using them. But I just keep writing, and I just start. So it's kind of a more free-form thing, I think.
So how long does it take you to finish a review, Brad? Like when you start writing it, how long does it generally take you to crank something out?
So if I finish a game and I just walk over to the computer and I start writing, in general it takes me about maybe an hour and a half, and that's for a first draft. And then I'll inevitably go over it like 5 more times. But each draft after that is only like 5 or 10 minutes. So pretty quick. I think I've got it down almost to science.
And Brad, you play more games than anyone I've ever met in my entire life. Do you review every single one of them, or how do you pick and choose?
I'll just play some stuff, and I mean, as a critic, I really want to keep my cred. I got to keep my street cred. So I feel like I have to play a lot of the big titles that come out. So I'll definitely play those. I may not review them all, but I will try to. And as far as the games that I play for just pleasure, I mean, if something pops up that I think is really fun or interesting, or that was just terrible, if I've got something to say about it, then I'll go ahead and do that. But I play quite a bit of games that I never review at all. So it's 6 of one, half dozen the other.
See, I don't, and not to disparage your methodology or anything, Brad, but I really don't like the idea of me feeling obligated to play a game. Because, I mean, if a game comes out and I'm not interested in it at all, that I'm probably not going to play it at all, at least not until it gets super, super cheap in a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't feel any sort of particular obligation to play major releases or anything like that.
Well, for me, it's more of like I want to... Well, and I support you in that, Richard, also. I don't mean to say that like I think a critic has to.
Yes!
I'm just kind of yeah, you're off the hook. You're off the hook. No, but I think, when conversations happen, I want to be able to participate in those. And sometimes people ask me my opinion of some things, and, I don't like to say, well, I don't know. I mean, I've actually done it more this particular year, than any year previous, just because there's been a lot of games that I just frankly just don't give a crap about. So I've kind of backed off of that a little bit. But I think that attitude for me personally extends more to important games, I guess. Like if I had never played Halo, like number 1, like I would go back and play Halo number 1. And that was actually why I even played it. There's a number of games that come out where you just kind of, for me anyway, I just feel like I kind of have to have an opinion in order to inform other opinions that I may have of other things, So it's not a must by any means. I mean, I think people can have a very interesting and valid opinion on a certain game, whether or not they've played the milestones in that genre. But
right.
Just for my personal preference, that's kind of where I fall on that issue.
Right.
I'm more of a selective gamer myself, but as Brad says, that kind of has its consequences. Like for sure, I'm gonna probably opt out of Game of the Year discussions this year because I just haven't been able to keep up. But I certainly admire Brad for his dedication, and I wish I could be more like him. Actually, I don't enjoy those AAA titles as much as I used to, so that also makes it difficult.
So, Chi, what would you say to the aspiring critic who's looking at a stack of games on his shelf, and he or she is thinking, "God, I want to review a game, but I just don't know. I don't know what game to tackle." What advice would you give to that person to help them decide what to review first?
What I would always say to our guest critics on our site would be, what game do you have the most to say about? Like, what's the most interesting game out of that, or which one do you have the most to say, whether it's good or bad? Actually, yeah, it doesn't even have to be like you have to like it, So that's where I always start.
Yeah, one thing that I notice a lot of new critics kind of trip themselves up on is that they'll gravitate to whatever the biggest game is at the moment. I mean, I guess the thinking is that it's going to be really popular. They're going to get a lot of readers or hits on it or something, which, it's true basically. But if you don't have anything unique to say about it, if you don't have a strong feeling, I mean, what ends up happening is you do this laundry list of features. And I see this like time and time and time again.
Yep.
And, I'm not trying to say that I've cornered the market on good reviews. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm just saying that when I see new people come in you almost know before they even write the review what it's going to be like. They're going to have the graphics are really great, and this part was so awesome, and then I did this part, and then it was so cool, and then the multiplayer, and it's just like they kind of just do the same kind of format, and they don't really put themselves as the author into it. And for me, what makes a good review, one that I like to read the most, is reading somebody's personal take. Like, I don't really need you to break down all the different features and tell me all the different modes. I mean, I don't care about that stuff. There's plenty of sites that'll do the nuts and bolts. What I want to read is somebody's personal take, and I think that's the part that's missing from most newer reviewers. I mean, that would be my advice, is it doesn't matter what game it is, especially at our side. I mean, if you want to pick a game from 10 years ago, we will certainly run it, that's for sure. It doesn't have to be the newest, latest, greatest, but I mean, have something to say and make it really interesting.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and I agree with that 100%, because every time I see a review that's written, it's not even really a review, it's more like a consumer guide. Like, it just sort of tells me what the game is, and it's like there's no opinion in there at all. Like, I'm supposed to be reading an editorial piece, and there's no editorializing at all. So
I think it's very hard for people, like, let's take a game like a Red Dead Redemption, only because I spent a lot of time playing it recently. And if you have an opinion about the combat system, about how it functions, you like it, you don't like it, whatever it happens to be, I think people find it difficult to express an opinion about something without explaining what it is objectively first. Like, here is what the combat system is. Here is how combat works. Now here is what I think about it. And I think people struggle with just giving an opinion without first describing it. At least that's a problem I have run into in the past.
That's definitely that's definitely one of the trickier parts of writing a review. You want to, and at the same time, you don't want to spoil things, right? You don't want to give away like the entire experience and then leave the reader with like sort of nothing, no surprises left. But at the same time, you have to give. What I always tend to tell writers is give enough detail just so to make your point, but then that's it, and try to leave them hungry for more, though.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, and that's actually one of the problems that I had when I first started writing reviews, which was relatively not that long ago, is that I would feel like I did have to explain how things worked before I gave an opinion on it. But when you're writing a review like that, you have to assume a little bit on the part of the reader that they're going to know the context that you're talking about. If you've got an opinion on the combat system, just say, combat system flows really, really well and blah, blah, blah. It's like you don't have to actually explain how it works. If they're interested in the game, they will play the game and see how it works for themselves, and then they'll come back to your review and then understand what you're talking about and either agree or disagree with you.
That's very true. I think that's true, but I think it's a really fine line. I mean, if anything, I think a lot of our writers, and I'm not naming anybody in particular, but I think a lot of the writers that we've worked with at the site over the years have kind of erred more on the opposite side, where they kind of assume a little bit too much. And so I think, for me as the editor and also as a frequent writer, it is a really fine line between giving enough mechanical detail so that a person reading your review understands like the mechanic that you're trying to describe, but then also like you don't want to give like 3 paragraphs explaining about how you push a button to make a reticle come up and then the reticle turns red and blah blah blah. I mean, you can totally overkill it, but at the same time, it's like a balancing act. I mean, there's no real magic bullet for this. It's kind of like you just have to read it. But for me as editor, I notice a lot that it's better to give just enough detail, like she said, to set the stage, and then just talk about what you thought about it. So it's tricky, though. It's very tricky. You don't want to leave the reader sitting there wondering, what's going on? I mean, what is he talking about? Like, what is the point of this thing that he's talking about? I don't understand because I haven't played the game. And at the same time, you don't want to like bore people who know what you're talking about into submission. So it's tough. It's a balancing act.
Yeah, you've got to establish your frame of reference in your opening, really. Because like you establish that at the beginning, and then you can go into the gory details and the rest of it. Or at least that's what I do.
One underused technique, I think, that is comparing the experience to something else that you've experienced in life, in to sort of as a stand-in, so people can kind of understand what you're going after. And go ahead.
I was gonna say, see, I really don't like doing that, like making real life analogies, because at least for me, when I read those, it comes off as more. I mean, it comes off as the writer just didn't have anything substantive to say about what they were writing about, so they chose to make some sort of analogy, which may or may not make sense. But I mean, again, that's just me.
Right, and that's a knock that we used to get a lot in the early days of the site, because we tried really hard to do that. But
I'm sorry. Did I just completely take a crap all over the early days of game critics?
well, you and everybody else, but yeah, no, that's fine. It's and admittedly we did go too far sometimes, but it was part of the learning process, I suppose. But I still think it's something you can do, and I'm struggling to come up with an example, but.
Well, I got a perfect example of this, man. I mean, I think the perfect example would be Gene Park's review of it was either Shenmue or was it Shenmue 2? I can't remember which one he did. But in that one, he compared the way that main character Ryo got around town to his living on Guam. And he noticed several cultural similarities in the Asian culture depicted in Shenmue to his own actual life. And I thought that was just a fantastic review. I mean, it was one of those examples where he was able to incorporate his real, actual personal experience and kind of reflect what Shenmue was giving him. And because of that perspective, he actually got more out of that game than I think the average person like living in like Nebraska would get out of it. I mean, not to say that Nebraska doesn't have culture or anything, but being kind of an Asian specific game, he had a kind of a perspective on it that I think a lot of people wouldn't see. So I do think that I definitely agree that there are certainly times when it can go too far, or when people don't really have anything to say, and so they talk about just really inappropriate examples. But I think that when a writer is able to incorporate themselves or something they've done in a way that really reflects on the material, I think it's just really powerful. I mean, unfortunately, I don't see it done all that often, so it's not like there's a whole wealth of examples to show. But I think when it works for me anyway.
Yeah, and a lot of times when I do see it done, it's not done well at all. Like, it just overwhelms. Like the review becomes about this story that the writer is telling, and not necessarily about the game that they're reviewing. Because if you've got a personal story that you want to tell that you think gives you some sort of insight into the game or gives you some sort of credibility with the game, by all means tell it, but don't make it take up like half the review. Because then it becomes like not about the game and about that whatever it is, that story you're telling.
And let me just give a little logic to the technique also. The idea is that, in a game critics, we try to write to as broad an audience as possible. I always tell our writers, would your mom understand this, or something like that. Don't assume you're writing to like the most hardcore of hardcore gamers, and you have to be able to make this content relatable to people, maybe even to someone who's never even played a game in their entire life. So that's the reason why for it. It's not to show off, that you have a gigantic brain or anything like that. It's really just to make the content relatable.
But how much of an onus do you put on the reader to have a base understanding of what you're talking about? If I gave a review of Halo to my grandmother and it contained the words first-person shooter, she would have no idea what that means. But are you going to spend 3 sentences defining what a first-person shooter is? What's the tipping point there?
But we do make it a point in our style guide. It does say you put FPS and then in parentheses you put first-person shooter, so they can look it up if they have to. But yeah, I think there's some hand-holding to some extent, but not to that degree. Not to. And thankfully for the internet, you can hyperlink terms if it's really technical. But we try not to handhold too much. But it's as we've been saying, it's a balancing act.
Yeah, don't underestimate the power of hyperlinks to do your explaining for you.
And as far as writing for a broader audience, every site's going to be different. Certain sites are going to be definitely more for catering to a hardcore audience. I think. If you look at the mission of game critics, it's one of diversity, and I think we've always wanted to be more inclusive, than any other gaming site. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why, we write to a much broader audience. It even trickles down to like the design, which back in 10 years ago, we were like the only bright white and orange gaming site. Every gaming site was black back then. And it's funny now that Joystick redesigned and now they're incorporating orange as well.
We had orange first, damn it.
Seriously,
Yeah.
That's our domain. We are orange now and forever. Here's a big question. It affects everybody, and I'm curious how much it affects each of you. Writer's block. You're staring at the blank Word document. You've got a blank legal pad, however you're writing the review, and you just can't get the words out. How do you get through it? I'll turn to you, Brad, first.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know how you guys feel, but for me, the part that I often find myself kind of hung up on is the opening, because the opening is really important. I mean, it sets the tone for your entire review. It kind of tells the reader what your line of thinking is going to be. I mean, it can, if you start with just the beginning, that's where I get stuck the most. And, I don't really believe in writer's block. I think it's kind of just a way of explaining that you're not approaching the problem correctly. I mean, I think you have to just keep going. I mean, my answer for writer's block is just write. Just write something. Just write anything, even if it sucks, because you can always clean up something that sucks, but if you have a blank page, you have nothing to work with. So generally, if I get stuck on the opening, if it doesn't come to me right away, I'll just start writing. I'll just write about, I'll just do an informational piece about what the game's about. I mean, I can always kind of massage that a little bit. I'll write what I think were the good and bad points, I mean, it may be a little formulaic before I find my through line, but then by the time I've got half or maybe 3/4 of the review, usually an opening will come to me, and then I can go back and tweak from there. So, I mean, to me, if you can't write, you have to write. Just start writing. It doesn't matter. Just keep going. Don't stop.
Chi, what about you?
Yeah, I wanted to give Brad a big high five right there as far as what he was talking about, the opening intro or the opening line. I mean, it's one of the big takeaways I have from this show. I agree with Brad that it's sort of something. If you have writer's block, it's sort of symptomatic to a bigger problem. And I think that bigger problem is that you need to have something more interesting to write about. Go back to that first paragraph, and first of all, that first sentence, should always be a killer sentence. I mean, like there's so many reviews I've written or review submissions that have come our way from game critics where I read the first line and it's dead from there, and I can barely get through the entire review just based on that first line or that first paragraph. So, always have like what we preach at Game Critics is having a very strong concept for a review. What's the point of this review? What's the argument you're trying to make? And after you have that one point, everything else flows through that. Like every single point after that should be going toward that single concept. And I think that's what makes a strong review in that regard.
I'm exactly the same way. It's openings and really closings, too, are always the most difficult part for me. So really what I do is I start writing the body, like the meaty portions first, and then a lot of times I'll just, like while I'm writing the body, the closing or the opening will just sort of come out of that. Like I'll write a paragraph that I'm like, I should just use that as the opening or the closing. And but yeah, I mean, especially the closing is usually the most difficult part for me because that's the place where the closing is the place where you stop analyzing and you start being blunt, which is oftentimes difficult for me because one of the biggest problems that I see in a lot of different reviews and user submissions is that they'll talk about, say that they've, criticized a game pretty heavily throughout the entire piece. And then in the closing, they'll say, despite all the problems, it's a pretty good game, and then not say why. It's like you have to be really careful not to, especially if it's a long piece, you have to be really careful not to contradict anything that you've said previously. And that's always a bit of a challenge for me.
Well, that's where it goes back to that intro. And the reason why that happens is because they're sort of just going through the paces. They're just sort of covering, the game, each individual element as its own, and not thinking about it entirely. I mean, if the point of the review was to say that this game is, as you said earlier, competent, then every paragraph should be about how the game is competent, not like oversell or undersell that to the large degree.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I was going to say that's actually really true. And, no disrespect to anybody out there who's actually lucky enough to make a living at writing reviews. I mean, I know a few people who do. And props to them for sure, because that's a really, really difficult gig. But I can always pick out a writer who's doing it for money and who's doing it because they just want to do it. Because you can always tell, because when these professional guys, and I love them. This is not a diss or anything, but you can tell that they're like on a deadline because they always have the whole standard intro, and then at the line they're always like, hit the jump and find out what I thought. Like it's like totally like boilerplate. They're like running on automatic. I'm sure they've had like 27 cups of coffee by that point. It's like their 5th review of the day or something. They always go, oh, this part was great, this part sucked, this part was great, and then at the end, blah, blah, blah. If you like the last one, you like this one, but it won't change your mind, blah, blah, blah. And so like you can always tell, because those guys have it down to like such like an autopilot like response that they can just crank them out. And those are the kind of things that we generally try not to run, or we don't want our writers to like follow that template. I mean, I know that sometimes you kind of have to, and like I said, I'm not insulting those people who write those reviews and get paid for it, because I think that's awesome. But for us, because we don't operate that way, we kind of strive to have like more of a message. And like she said, you have to like get your feeling of the game through in every paragraph. I mean, for me, when I write my reviews, I structure them in a way so that not that I'm hitting every single aspect of the game. Like, I'm not going to have a paragraph about the multiplayer. I'm not going to have a paragraph just about the graphics. I'm not going to have a paragraph just about the sound. I mean, everything in my reviews, at least I try. My goal is that by the time you get to the end of my review, I will have made a very convincing case as to why or why not I think this is a good or bad game. And sometimes that means I have to leave out whole sections of things that just don't really fit. I mean, if I'm trying to talk about how a game's immersive environments really moved me emotionally, it may mean that I will not get to the multiplayer part. And if I don't talk about it, well, that's okay, because I'm not really writing a consumer advice thing. I'm writing a review, or sometimes even like a lighter version of a critique or something. So we really want the message. We want the feeling. We want like your take. We don't really need to have the boilerplate.
Yeah, take your heart off your sleeve and put it on the page.
Exactly.
Brad,
don't be afraid to have an opinion.
All right. And Brad just underscored my second big takeaway, which was don't attempt to cover everything. Right? Just cover what matters.
Yeah, if it's not significant, then don't cover it.
How much importance do you guys put in the editing process, where a second set of eyes is taking a look at your review and giving feedback? And Richard, I'll turn to you first. As the newest critic, you probably got a lot of feedback early on. Maybe you are still getting feedback. How useful is that for you?
Oh, feedback is always tremendously useful, because they confirm, or they tell me whether or not I sound completely crazy, which is always a good thing to hear. Because it's like I'll submit something and I'll be like, man, is this really terrible? And then I'll hear back, it's like, no. I'm like, oh, sweet, it's good. So, but yeah, the feedback is. I never, once I get done writing something, I never have any confidence in it. I always think it's terrible, because I'm just a pessimist like that. So when I get feedback, it gets approved, it gets runs through the rigors or whatever, then I know it's been QA tested. Like, I didn't just turn in crap and just be done with it. So yeah, feedback to me confirms that I'm doing. I don't want to say doing it right, but doing it well.
I've had that same feeling as well. Sometimes I'll finish writing something and I'll just be like, am I crazy? Yeah. Am I the only person who thinks this in the entire world?
Yeah, it's like as soon as I'm done with it, I'm just like, okay, am I just stupid, or did nobody else think this?
Right. So I think that's a very natural feeling, and I certainly appreciate having someone else validate, what I'm thinking. I'm not so. I think that's an important attribute of a writer, to be humble. I don't. There are times where I put something together and I'll be like, yeah, this is killer, but more often than not, sometimes I really do think I'm like absolutely crazy and I have no idea what I'm talking about. But I'll let someone confirm whether I made sense or not. So I think it's important for sure.
Well, feeling like you're crazy is nothing new at Game Critics. I mean, we've had like way more than our fair share of people, try to call us in the carpet or accuse us of being, professional outliers. We should make a shirt that says Game Critics on one side and Outliers on the back or something.
Right.
But just so you guys know, I mean, maybe you guys don't know, but every review that goes through the site comes through me first, and I have the first approvals and edits of all the reviews that come through. And honestly, most of our writers right now are tremendously strong writers. I mean, they all have a really, really good grasp on the language and using it proficiently and using it convincingly. So my job has actually gotten really, really easy lately. I mean,
You're
it's my
welcome.
favorite thing. Yeah, thank you. It's my favorite thing to get a submission, and I go to the site and I look at the rough draft, and like, if I don't have to do anything to it, I'm like, yes, yes, I can have my evening tonight. I don't have to clean anything up. Oh, it's awesome. So really, I'm having more and more of those nights lately, and I'm just really proud of the crew that we've got. I mean, everybody here is really, really awesome, and they're really talented, and I'm just so proud. So. Even though I am not afraid to send things back. I mean, there's been times when I've sent reviews back like, 5 and 6 times for a rewrite, which by that point gets pretty painful to everybody involved. But thankfully, it's not been like that lately.
Let me turn to each of you now, and I know you have all, at one point or another, written extensively about the reviewing process and your own personal philosophies. Is there anything else you wanted to share with our audience about your game reviewing methodology? Chi, I'll start with you. Anything I haven't asked about that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I just like to say that critics, good critics, not only tell you what they think, but they also say what needs to be said. And I think what that means is, I'm not sure what that means.
No.
No, I'm just trying to be. I don't know. It's hard to. I thought that statement was pretty clear, but trying to elaborate on that is a little trickier. I guess. I just think we all strive to be objective in some way as critics, and we're trying to write something of value. So I think that's what I mean when I say you got to write what needs to be said. And for example, for me, one of my most memorable examples of that was just the amount of praise that Grand Theft Auto 3 was getting. I thought it was just way off the charts. It was just beyond just losing all sense of objectivity as far as what people were saying about it. It was like people were just going nuts over it. They were omitting some very glaring things, like how it was the graphics were just not that great. There were a lot of technical problems, and the writing wasn't the strongest ever. And so I felt it was important that that there be a contrarian voice in that regard. So I was that voice. Yeah, and let me also explain. I don't say that to just sort of rain on everyone's parade. Yeah, I get that you love this game, but that's the thing. If you really love this game, you don't want to be that guy like 10 years from now looking back and be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I said that."
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm trying to help you prevent. I'm trying to prevent you from embarrassing yourself. I'm trying to prevent the game industry from embarrassing themselves. And I sort of saw that again with like Uncharted 2. Just people were just saying some of the most ridiculous things. And it's okay to appreciate the game for what it is and for what it's accomplishing, but don't like lose all sense of objectivity to it to the point where you're just gonna feel really stupid 10 years from now. And you're not doing anything for the culture or for the game by being completely, not of saying things that are just, too far out there,
Yeah, it's very. Eventually, a good critic is going to have to learn to walk the very fine line between objectivity and subjectivity.
Yeah, it's a balance. It's that's
a tricky balancing act.
Yeah, it's always a balancing act. Yeah.
Let me move on to Richard then.
Oh, I've been moved on to.
You are now officially moved on to.
Sweet.
You published an article on this very topic. What else did you want to share with our audience?
First thing to do for anyone that is trying to write reviews is just write in the way that feels most natural to you. Write how it feels comfortable. And then once you're done, submit it to an editor. Just have it read, have them tell you what works and doesn't work, and then just go from there. But the most important thing is to just don't try to write in a way that does not feel natural to you. Like, make sure that trying to figure out how I want to word this. Just make sure that you're using your own voice and you're not trying to just cover it up. Like, write what in a way that feels comfortable for you, and then let your editors pick it apart.
Can I add to that, Richard? I like to think that every writer has a unique voice.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's what we try to encourage at Game Critics. We want to hear that unique voice because we don't want, again, our site is about, individual perspectives, and we want to hear that voice. We think there's value to that voice. We don't want everyone else to sound like everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. Like, don't drown yourself out trying to sound a specific way.
And and it's really scary because unfortunately, even a lot of professionals think this way. And it actually scared me to hear this. Like on another podcast, I heard like one professional critic actually say like, "Oh, I really didn't like this game, but I was afraid of what all the being sort of labeled the outlier and all that other stuff." So she actually kind of like went along just for the sake of like not sticking out, which to me was baffling. Like I don't get that. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, there's this illusion of subjectivity, or not subjectivity, illusion of objectivity that exists within some criticism, and I think that sometimes tempers a writer's inclination to put their own opinions and their own voice into an article, and that really shouldn't happen. At least I don't think it should.
Brad, any last words of advice for our listeners?
There's a lot of different things I could say, but I think it comes down to a couple really crucial things. I mean, I think that if you're a good writer, you're a good writer. I see a lot of people who really want to be writers, and I really try my best to encourage them and, give them feedback and try to nurture them along. But sometimes they just can't, and that's really painful to a lot of people. And it's painful to me to even have to say that to some people because somebody's got a dream, they've got something they're excited about. I mean, that's a really positive thing. But as an editor and as someone who, reads a lot of things and writes a lot, I mean, there just comes a time when you just look at somebody's output and you just say, this is not good. And I don't think you can really get that much better. I mean, I think if you're a good writer, you're a good writer. And that's going to come through. So that's one thing. That's just kind of a hard reality that some people have to face.
If you suck, you suck, says Brad Gallaway.
I hate it to sound so harsh, but I think that, like, for example, there's been one guy in particular I can think of, very enthusiastic, very energetic, very open to feedback, very open to criticism, great guy, easy to work with, and he writes terrible. I mean, I can remember going through like 8 and 10 rewrites, and it was just so painful because no matter what I said, like, he just wasn't getting it. And
I'm sorry.
No, it's not Richard. No, it's not Richard. It's no. No. But anyway, I mean, that's just a reality. I mean, it's kind of like those people on American Idol, like when you're watching like the Freak of the Week show at the beginning of the season, and these people get up there and they think they sound so good, and they obviously love to sing. And sometimes the judges feel bad about it, but they're like, dude, you can't sing. Like, no matter how much you want to sing, you're not going to be able to sing. And I really, really, I'm not trying to be egotistical, and I'm not trying to say that like I have it and you don't. And I really don't want it to sound like that. But I think just as an editor, and I've edited works of fiction in addition to reviews. I mean, I think that sometimes you got it, sometimes you don't, and if you don't, you don't. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're not a bad person, but you just don't. But for those that do, yeah, go ahead.
So can I just add to that, Brad? I think
yeah.
I totally hear what you're saying, but it's not like exactly like singing though. I think this is something that people can work on. I think what the struggle is that in order to change as a writer, you have to change as a person, right? So you have to really like go in a completely different direction, and that's very hard for people, I think. But I think
I agree. But
if someone, but I don't want to leave people in a lurch there. So like if there's somebody who just it's their absolute dream to become a writer or to review games. But they're just not quite cutting the mustard in the eyes of whatever editors they've worked with, then yeah, you need to like just take a huge step back and just take it in a completely different direction. Don't make micro changes. You got to make big time macro changes, and maybe then you might get somewhere. Yeah.
No, that's very true. I mean, that's very true. I think it's kind of like you said. I mean, I think when people start out, they write something, they think this is cool, I like it. And they don't understand what's wrong with it or why it doesn't function well as a review, and then they're not able to take that step back and do a real, true evaluation, and they can't see what's wrong with it because they're so focused on thinking it must be good. And I mean, those people don't really get anywhere. So yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, I think if you're the kind of person who can honestly take criticism openly and just really look at something and don't be afraid to completely do a rewrite and tear it apart and start from scratch, then yeah, you can make it. But I mean, I think those people are really few and far between, and I think those people are going to be good writers anyway. So, but yeah, I agree with you, Chi. I agree. But the other thing that I really wanted to say was that, if you put a review out there, like, please just be courageous and be brave. It was kind of like what you guys mentioned about that reviewer who kind of harshed her own views back in order to kind of go along with the crowd. I mean, that doesn't get anybody anywhere. That doesn't do anyone any good. You have to be brave enough to think, well, if I write this publisher is never going to give me another free game for the rest of my life. Am I okay with that? The answer has to be yes. You're going to have to write something and say, I'm going to put this opinion out there, and I'm going to get 42,000 hate mails in my e-box. I'm going to get death threats. Are you going to be okay with that? I mean, okay, maybe not the death threats. I don't think anybody needs to be okay with death threats. But you have to be prepared that people are going to hate you, that people are going to call you all kinds of filthy, disgusting names. They're going to say all kinds of nasty stuff about you. And you just have to be okay with that. Like, you cannot be a powerful writer. You cannot be an effective writer if you are constantly writing in fear. Like, you have to write from a courageous place, and you have to be brave about what you're doing. And I think those people find success, and they write really interesting things, and they're very good at what they do, and those are the things that I personally love to read the most. I have absolutely no use for all those like Me Too, copycat, everything's cool in this game reviews that like litter the internet, because they don't serve any purpose. They just really don't. So if you are the person who is not afraid to piss people off, if you're saying what you really want to say, then you're the kind of writer who needs to get out there.
Well said. All three of you. Very well said. To wrap this up, Chi, do you want to talk a little bit about Game Critics' open submission policy? If we have inspired somebody tonight and they would like to submit something to the site, can you talk a bit about how that works?
Sure. If they go to our forums, there is a user community review forums there, and all they have to do is just create an account and review our guidelines, our format, and you post the review there, and hopefully, if you get enough comments from other readers and our own staff members take notice of it, we'll publish it on the homepage. Logistically, 2 of our staff members have to approve it before we put it on the homepage, and after we publish 5 of your reviews, we invite you to become an official staff person of the site.
Yeah, that's how I got on.
Yep, Richard was the first.
Oh. He came up from the farm leagues.
Yeah.
Or you could host the Game Critics podcast and become a staff member that way.
Or that way.
That's the alternative. If any of you would like to start a rogue podcast.
The unofficial GameCritics.com podcast. Nobody from GameCritics.com is on this podcast.
Well, actually, Tim technically came from the by invitation method.
That's true. But let me ask you guys this, and this is where we'll end the conversation tonight. If I was to write my first review...
It can't be Wing Commander. It cannot be Borderlands.
Well, that's
not be what else? It can't be any of those things. I'm vetoing that right now as editor. You cannot.
That's what I was going to ask.
No.
You know me.
No.
What game should I write what should my first review be?
Borderlands.
No.
Wait.
Actually, in reviewing something that you really love is actually really hard, right? Do you agree with me, guys? I mean, it's one of the hardest things.
It can be very difficult, yeah.
Sometimes. But Tim, you had criticisms of Borderlands. I mean, you weren't just like totally in love with it, right?
I came around on Borderlands. I was initially very turned off by it, and then I grew to cherish it. Borderlands is kind of in my past. I'm not sure I want to go there. I think I've said everything I want to say about Borderlands on this show. So
what's a game that you had really funny comments on? Was it like Red Dead? I remember there was a couple of games where you were talking, you just had us all in stitches over.
Well, that's probably every game I talk about, isn't it? Oh. I don't know. I'll tell you the game I'm thinking about. And this, to me, I don't think anyone has reviewed an iPhone game on the website, but there is a...
Yes, they have.
Have they?
Yeah.
Yes. I think there's been 2. One or 2.
Jason Carney has. Yeah.
Did he?
Mm-hmm.
There's a great game. Fantastic game that will be in my top 10 for the year called Game Dev Story. You guys may have heard about it. It was very hot on Twitter for a little while, but you basically run your own game company. And you design your own games. You can design your own console. Just an incredible game. Very simple, absurdly addictive. That's the one I'm thinking about writing.
Sounds kind of like Racketeer, to be honest with you. Very simple and addicting concept.
That is a game I bought on the Steam sale that I'm probably never going to play.
Among others.
I'm saying that to irk you, Richard. So that may be my first review, but no.
I think that's a good idea, Tim.
Yeah.
Dan Weissenberger has talked about this on the show before, but whenever you have a game that like only you know about, or that you think you're the only person who knows about it, and you're just dying to share it with the rest of the world, that usually makes for a pretty good review, also.
Definitely.
Okay. So look for that soonish. Let's see. But before that happens, I want to talk just briefly about the shows we have on tap for the rest of 2010. I think we're going to squeeze in 2 more shows. The next show, I will be playing the all-powerful host trump card. I am going to force you guys into some discussion of World of Warcraft. Cataclysm is coming out in 1 week, and I want to talk about why that game still has its hooks into me after all these years. So that won't be the whole show, but that is going to come up on the next show as a segment. And then our last show of the year will be our annual award show for 2010. We did it last year. We create a bunch of crazy categories. We go nuts. We'll have some special guests, and watch the website. We'll be announcing a way for you, the listener, to get involved. Watch the website for that. I just ad-libbed that. I have no idea how we're going to do that, but now that I've said it, we have to do it. We have to.
Great. We have to come up with something now.
Put the pressure on.
I know,
Jeez.
dude. Seriously.
So anyway, gentlemen, as always, a pleasure. We're going to wrap it up. That will do it to our audience. Thanks so much for listening. You're free to go. We'll see you next time. Good night, and bon chance. All right, Richard, let's set a night. We'll play PC, Left 4 Dead. You pick the best level out of the 2 games, and we'll play together as brothers.
Okay. I can probably get at least one other person to join us.
Do they have facial hair? Do they have a mustache or beard?
One of them does.
All right, we'll get that guy.
There's a fourth person that I know does not have facial hair.
He's out. No.
Okay.
Don't want him. All right. Good. Let's find a time this week and do it.
All right.